hanging out underneath the glacier in an ancient river. Whew. This is my playground. So glaciers are moving rivers of ice. This glacier moves every day. It's pulled down by gravity from the ice field above. This ice field gets around 100 feet of snow every year. That 100 feet of snow condenses down to about a quarter inch of very dense ice, and the ice is then covered with the successive years of ice and snow until eventually this ice field is anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 feet thick, and it covers 1,500 square miles approximately. And what happens is the overflowing snow and ice is pulled down by gravity, carving out deep U-shaped valleys, which are called glaciers, and they grind up mountains and the native bedrock. And our native bedrock in this particular glacier has things like phosphorus, iron, and silica, and those are ground up and they flow to the sea in the glacial outwash plain in all of the rivers and rivulets flowing to the sea, and it becomes the lifeblood of the sea. So glaciers are very vital in our world, on our planet. So what happens in the sea is it mixes with this enormous tidal exchange and also the trophic cascade of the giant humpback whales and other whales in other regions around this area. They actually mix and churn the water all day long, along with the tides. We have up to a 24-foot tide, or even 25-foot tide in a 24-hour period. So every 6 hours the tide changes. So we have low tide, high tide, low tide, high tide. And so what happens is that water churns and mixes, and then in the long days of sunlight here in Alaska in the summertime, at the summer solstice, it allows those minerals to photosynthesize, and they become the lifeblood of the sea. The single-celled organisms called diatoms are formed by the silica. The silica allows their self to be hardened. Otherwise, they would just be sort of a gelatinous substance with no formation. So the single-celled organisms are the baseline of the food web of the sea, and everything in the sea eats it or it eats something that eats it. And they also provide oxygen. 60% of the Earth's oxygen comes from the phytoplankton, or the plankton. And so the next in the food chain is the zooplankton, or the animal plankton, and they feed on the phytoplankton. And even the big organisms like humpback whales and other whales feed on plankton as well, and everything else in the food chain, or something eats it that then they eat. So anyways, it's very vital in the ecosystem, including in that process, the salmon. We have the largest naturally wild-producing Pacific salmon population in the world, and the salmon come up the salmon streams to spawn. Those are the same streams and rivers and rivulets that the glaciers flow out. And so that water allows the right oxygen content and bioavailable carbon for the salmon to spawn, lay their eggs, and the eggs to be fertile and hatch in the form of an avalon, which needs the bioavailable carbon to grow, and it allows those little baby salmon to eventually reach the sea. So they're actually fertilizing everything for perpetuity, because when the salmon spawn once, they all die. And when those salmon die, they're providing valuable nutrients, feeding this ecosystem. We actually even have the isotopes of salmon in the tops of our trees. So that is providing not just things like carbon, but it's also providing nitrogen as well. And so that's feeding this area that's recently deglaciated with very little proper fertilizer. So it allows the ecosystem to begin anew, starting with the moss and the lichen, and adding things like alder and fireweed and things like that, which also sometimes some of these plants are also nitrogen fixers, or trees as well. So they actually add more nitrogen, taking it from the air, transforming it into usable nitrates. And for example, the deciduous alder tree, when it drops its leaves, it then fertilizes the land, the watershed, and the sea as well. So these salmon actually grow so prolifically and in such abundance because this area is fertilized by the glaciers, so it really is a true circle of life. They then begin to feed the entire ecosystem after these glaciers recede. So glaciers are very vital in the entire world ecosystem, including for humans to breathe. Thank you.